Hey, what's up, guys? Sebastian Castillo here. Welcome to part two of my years in China. This was the last picture that we were taking a look at, and so we're just going to go from there. If I can get the slide to change. So this was 2015 in September, I believe. So to give you a bit of context, in around May, June 2015, I volunteered or I put my name down to start teaching English to members of the university community. And one of these guys was an older Chinese man who was either the general manager or the owner of one of the dormitories on campus, as well as a number of, he was also in charge of a number of campus events like the one you see here. And he wanted to learn English because his son, his daughter-in-law, and his granddaughter were living in Australia, and he figured that as his granddaughter grows up, he would be visiting there quite often, and he would need some basic English in order to get by. So that didn't quite pan out, mainly because I did not understand how to put together a proper lesson plan. I found it pretty overwhelming. But anyways, um, I took this opportunity here. I didn't get paid for it, but I figured it would be just a lot of fun to get up there and, you know, recite this poem and be a part of something. And that's one of the things that I found so special and so unique about China is that, like it or not, I'm just saying it the way it is. If you're a foreigner and if you're uh, especially a Westerner, and if you're white and you're tall and you're decent looking, you can get a lot of opportunities that probably wouldn't come your way as easily if you were, say back home, or for me in Canada, right? But in this case, because I knew that guy and because I kind of fit the bill, he was excited to invite me to take part in this event. Um, and the rest of these people here were fellow students of mine. This guy was from Azerbaijan. You can't see her really, but in the back, I think this girl's from Indonesia. This guy's from Russia, and she was from South Korea. And we were all reciting a poem here in Chinese. Anyways, oops, oh, going back too far. This was taken at the beer festival in Shanghai. And now, if you are in Shanghai or if you're anywhere in China, I'm going to tell you, attending one of these beer festivals is a phenomenal way to, to pick up some good-looking girls, because people go there just to, get drunk and hang out, right? Basically. Um, I'm not talking about this girl, but I did meet one after taking this photo who was very good looking, and we definitely had a good relationship for the next couple of months. Now, this is fast forwarding a lot. I guess as I was looking through my photos, I didn't have too many from that year, but this was taken a year later in September of 2016. I had applied for the Chinese government scholarship, and if you're not familiar with that, you can just look it up. I'm really not sure how it works these days, but in 2016, it was open to pretty much anyone from any country. And you could, if you were selected, and if you demonstrated that your Chinese was good enough, you could get a full ride bachelor's degree or master's program, or even a PhD, I think, just by applying. And they would pay for your tuition, they'd pay for your lodging, and they'd even give you some spending money. And I was selected, I got it. And it was pretty crazy, but I figured, this would be a great way to continue staying in China and keep my expenses low. Because again, at that time, I really didn't care too much about making money. I just cared more about having enough time to live my life and be free and enjoy things. So this was the opening ceremony for the school that I was attending. Uh, and as you can see, We have, members of the People's Liberation Army. We have like just a bunch of random people. To be honest, I had no idea what the hell they were talking about, but you can get an inside peek at what it's like. All of these students down here are in uniform. Although they only had to wear this uniform for like the one occasion, right? They don't have to wear that every single day. Um, oh, excuse me, I have something on my eye there. But I snapped a couple of photos and I just left after because I had no idea what they were talking about. Okay, so this was taken again in September, and where do I start? So, like on the left here, we have my mentor who was teaching me about, you know, how to get into the English teaching business over there, and this was a luxury apartment uh, owned by this guy here in the middle, Mr. Wu from the city of Wenzhou. This guy to the left of him, Mr. Zhang, ended up becoming a mentor of mine in a way. We just hung out a lot, right? We had dinners, we got drunk, and you know, Chinese people like to talk to foreigners, right? A lot of them, not all of them, but many of them are quite curious and they really like to get a different perspective on things. And also, they they like to party, man. I mean, you know, these guys have a lot of money. They have, free time. They like to eat good and they like to drink good. And so I was invited out here quite often. Um, and it was a good time. Every time I left there, I was always like, I wasn't stumbling, but I felt good. I was on a good level. One of Mr. Wu's businesses actually, I think, involved importing wine to China from Spain, and that was some damn good red wine, I gotta say. So this is back at school within the first week or two, and I look like a total dork in the school uniform. Looking back, I just think this is so cringe, and I shouldn't have even done this. Um, and truth be told, at the time, in my heart, I felt like this wasn't the right thing to be doing. I knew that this course of action wasn't, it just didn't sit right. It wasn't the path I should have continued following. But anyways, these are some of my fellow classmates. This guy's from Uzbekistan. He spoke pretty good English. She's actually Chinese. I thought she was a foreigner, but she is a, how to pronounce this correctly, like a Uyghur, right? One of the people from the north western part of the country, from Xinjiang, and so she's a Muslim, but she spoke really good English as well. Um, I think she was Japanese. She was definitely Chinese, and she was like Malaysian Chinese. Um, anyways, anyways, here we are back in Mr. Wu's place. Um, you can't. I don't know what my watch is very well, but I do remember like this one guy here talking about how this watch was worth like 100 grand. And I was just like, holy fuck! Like these people exist. They actually own watches worth this much money. And as I spent more time in China, like I became more and more aware of just how much money was out there, how much like what kinds of people had it, and how little of it I had. Because looking back, I think, holy crap, like, I was really poor. I really didn't have a lot of money. Um, but it didn't bother me a lot because I didn't care too much, nor was I even conscious of the fact that I could make that kind of money. You know what I mean? This was taken, I think, the day when I was helping my mentor move into his new place, and we were just clowning around a bit. Obviously, I'm flexing my muscles a bit there. This was this was in Korea, yeah. So now we're fast forwarding again to the uh, maybe around June, July of 2017. And I took a trip to Korea, um, because I had a couple of friends from there, including this guy here. This is a good guy. He actually spent, I think it was a year in Calgary, Canada, to learn English. Like when a couple of years before that, so he spoke really good English. That was one of the reasons why we were friends, because we could communicate, right? But yeah, that was good times. Korea was always a good time, although I think it was a little more expensive than Shanghai, but it was good. I liked it. He was seeing me off at the airport. I think I think I was flying from Korea to Beijing and then from Beijing back to Vancouver, but I'm not entirely sure. Or it might have been from Korea to Guangzhou, but something like that. Okay, now we're in 2017 in either September, October, probably around then because I'm still wearing a t-shirt. And we were all hanging out at the Bund. As you can see, like I was making new friends constantly, and this guy right in the center here is still one of my really good friends to this day. He's from Jordan, and at that time, man, like he was a crazy motherfucker. This is one thing that you definitely take note of when you live outside of your home country. That when you meet, like especially if you're a young person, when you meet other young people, you're meeting a kind of a different version of them, because if you're if you're in a different country, you will probably act differently than you would back home, where you know a bunch of people and where there would be more social consequences if you acted out of line or did something kind of embarrassing, right? But especially when you're in China, like no one gives a fuck, man. Everyone just kind of does what they want, and that was one of the things I really enjoyed about it. Now this was a dinner I had with some Chinese friends here. In particular, this guy at the back. Um, he was a really cool guy, man. He was someone I met in the first year in China in the gym, actually. I've made good friends from the gym. And he was pretty well off financially. He owned a couple of restaurants. He was in the process of opening up his own boxing gym, since that was one of his passions. And we would meet maybe once a month, once every 2 months, because he was a busy dude. But every time we'd meet, he would just pimp it out. Like he always told me, like, I got the bill, don't worry, right? Um, and we go out and we drink and have fun and stuff. And he spoke really good English as well, because he had done a master's program in New York, I think. But it was always a good time with him. I learned a lot about making money from him, and more so like about the attitude, right? This guy, it kind of bothered me at first, because I felt like, oh, he cares too much about money. But then I realized, well, you have to care. You have to care if you want to win the game. And he was always like on some kind of different project. He was always hustling. He always had a lot of energy. That's one thing that was just great about them. This guy was always like, you know, always down to talk about ideas to make money, which is great. Um, and I also remember him telling me, this is kind of a side note, but I remember him telling me when he was in New York, the only people that really gave him a hand were white people. He said that even the other Chinese weren't that welcoming to him. So that was interesting to hear it from his point of view. Now, this was a temple I visited. Um, excuse me. Frankly, I think that once you visit Asia, like yeah, go visit some temples, but once you've seen one of them, you've pretty much seen all of them. But I'm just showing you here for, you know, just to prove that I've been there. This friend of mine was Turkish, and he was a really funny guy. Not like I actually mean that. He was hilarious. He was probably one of the funniest people I'd ever met. Initially, when I'd met him, he could not speak very good English, and that was the case actually with a lot of foreigners. especially from like Turkey. He really couldn't communicate in English. But then I think a year or two later, we met again, and he could finally get by in English. And this is quite funny because a lot of foreigners will learn English in China, um, and then learn Chinese because English is actually so much more useful to them, right? But he was a great guy, and I still talk to him to this day. And there we are in the cabin, and this guy in the middle. Uh, oh man, like where do I even start? Like just by looking at him, you can tell like he's bad news. This guy was like the biggest mooch, the biggest leech you can even fathom. Like this guy, um, I met him through, well, at the time when I was doing a bit of this, and I came to learn that this guy had major financial issues, right? Like he was really stressed out and he couldn't hold down a job. He felt like he was better than that, even though he hadn't really proven it. And for a number of months, I remember seeing him around, and like he'd always be like drunk or something. And I'd be like, dude, if you want to fix your life, why do you keep getting drunk and, just dicking around? And he'd get angry when people would point that out to him, including me. And he was notorious for always begging people for money, and almost never repaying his debts, although I think he did pay me back when I lent him a bit of money. um, but yeah, he became notorious as like the biggest leech ever. um, but whatever, you meet all sorts of people there. This was on, I don't think it was on my birthday, but it was around then, in the one of the restaurants of the guy that I showed in one of the previous slides. And he treated me. He said, have some chicken, and there's also a bunch of barbecue, and we were drinking. This in my hand here is called Guizhou Mao Tai. It's like the go-to one of the top quality alcoholic drinks in China. It's like what they call it baijiu, which is a kind of rice wine. And they claim that it doesn't give you a hangover, although I beg to differ. But anyways, it was a great time. As you can see, I'm clearly already a bit inebriated. And this was my 21st birthday, I think. Yeah, I think it was my 21st birthday. So we are going a little back and forth here in terms of time, but yeah, this was a great time. We were having all you can eat. Oh God, what is the name for this? It's not barbecue. It has a name. It's like a Japanese teppanyaki. Um, for $40, all you can eat. You know, all you can drink, all you can eat. Great deal. Um, got some good friends here, whom I still keep in contact with to this day. That's one thing that I've always valued a lot. Like if I make friends with someone, I really want it to be a long-term thing and not just fly by night. This friend of mine from Ecuador, we still keep in touch. This guy from Belarus, we still keep in touch. And this guy from, like, he had a couple of different nationalities, but I believe he spent most of his time in Britain. But he was like Swiss, and he also had a New Zealand passport. But yeah, really great guy, really great guys. This was in my dorm, and I had that year I had made friends with a bunch of Koreans. I went out with this girl briefly. Uh, I stayed with this guy in Korea when I went on my trip. Um, and if you don't know, Koreans like to drink. Um, I mean, you could say that about people from a lot of cultures, but I mean, holy crap, Koreans drink like fish. It's just insane. It was good times. This friend of mine here was from Saudi Arabia, and I believe this meal was me thanking him for introducing me to an English teaching client. Um, this is about the time when I started to realize that, yeah, you need to kind of pay it forward if people do things that are nice for you, right? Because up till then, like I was so oblivious and I had such a scarcity mindset, right? When people would do me a favor or give me something, um, it wouldn't even cross my mind to do something nice in return. But nowadays, man, if someone, if I have the means to, obviously, if someone will lend me a hand to do something nice, I always make sure that I pay them back um, with more value than what they gave me, right? If they give me $1,000, I pay them 2,000, right? Maybe not all at once, but somewhere down the line, I make sure that they know that, hey, I really value the help that you gave me. And this guy, he was awesome. He was phenomenal. And we also still keep in touch. Now, this was me at the Shanghai International Film Festival. And this was again, like I was saying earlier, you get these crazy opportunities sometimes. And so this was me. I was This lady beside me was reading off cards in Chinese as the MC of the event. And then after she'd finished, I would just say the same thing in English. I wasn't translating on the spot, I had it memorized. I think I had it memorized, or I had some prompts written on the cards. Now, here, if I remember correctly, this was something like, oh God, I think this was 2017 in it was definitely around May. Um, it was definitely May. So what happened is my mentor went to Hong Kong and he invited me along. So I went, and then I figured in order to make the most out of the trip, on my way back to Shanghai, I would just stop in Shenzhen because it was literally just a short boat ride away from Hong Kong. And so I stayed there alone for a couple of days. I didn't really have any plans, and the weather was crap. Um, but at the hotel I was staying at, I got into the elevator, and then this guy and then his business partner were in there, and they were chit chatting. And, you know, as you can guess, they were kind of surprised to see a foreigner in there. And then we just started a conversation, and then they invited me to breakfast. And yeah, we were having beer for breakfast, and wasn't my idea, but you know, as they say in Chinese, 如想随俗. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, or enter the village, follow the customs. Um, Anyways, it was always a good time. It was a good conversation because you just never know what kind of people you'll meet, right? This was again with my Arab friend and another one of his countrymen, and this Ukrainian woman. I'm just gonna come right out and say it. Like, this Ukrainian woman probably slept with like half the male population of the school I was at. Like, she was known as being very, very loose. And well, there's really not much else to say about that. Just wrap it up, folks. Be safe out there. This was another field trip with some of my classmates. Um, Again, I have to point out, like, we just have such a diverse group. Although a lot of students at the school tended to be either Korean or Japanese, but like these three here, Korean, he was Japanese, he was Egyptian. Um, Zhou Haoliang, I still remember his Chinese name. He was a funny guy. He was a funny guy, but I liked him a lot. I do remember in class, I think we were talking about doing chores around the house, like cleaning and doing dishes and stuff. And I remember him saying, like, "Oh, if a man does stuff like that in my culture, people will make fun of him and shame him." And I thought, hell yeah. I don't want to be fucking cleaning and doing dishes and shit. I've got shit to do. I've got big money to make, let the women handle that, right? But good times. This is just me being vain and taking a picture of my physique. Although, like, for the longest time, I just felt like I was kind of, what is the word? Kind of like bobbing along, like kind of floating in the same position, in terms of how I looked. So looking back, it's really not that impressive, but it might just be the angle. This is kind of blurry, but I think this was 2017 again in September. No, this is October, during the October holiday. Uh, my Arab friend said he had some other Arab friends in a city called Iwu. And if you have done any kind of business with China, you might have heard of Iwu, as it is where one of the largest indoor markets is located. You can walk for kilometers inside this massive building where they have stalls and the vendors are selling all sorts of random stuff, like there are vendors who will literally be selling all sorts of like supplement bottles and stuff like that. Like any kind of item you can imagine is sold there, and it's sourced there, right? People, it's kind of common knowledge by now, right? People will go on Alibaba, they'll buy items in bulk and then, you know, slap their label on them or whatever, and then mark it up. But we decided to take a camping trip out to at one of the mountains there, and this is us just clowning around in like the early hours of the morning. This here was, if I remember correctly, this is something like 2017. Yeah, it was definitely still 2017. I had a friend of mine who was big into videography and photography, and Shanghai is a great place for that. It turned out to afford him a lot of opportunities, and he was invited to take pictures and videos at a bunch of different events. And this one here, like, you can't see anything besides what's in the picture, right? But it was like a bikini event. So they had a bunch of models walking down some stairs and, like, turning around and showing all angles of them wearing bikinis, right? And well, he kind of took me with him, and he said, just chill, just enjoy yourself, have some drinks, talk to some people. I'm like, okay, whatever. And knowing me, well, I just started chatting up the ladies there. This was my birthday. um, I think this was my 22nd birthday, with just a bunch of friends of mine. This guy on the right was the one who invited me to the bikini event, right? This guy was from Bosnia. He was from Taiwan. This was my mentor. And this is the Uzbek guy again. Same thing, my birthday, but this was a couple of days before that with just my classmates. They were all at the school with me. This she was half Japanese, half Chinese, and then she was half Chinese, half Ukrainian. So when you're in China, you will inevitably come across a number of individuals of mixed heritage, right? Like Chinese, as you can see, Chinese Ukrainian, Chinese Japanese, Chinese Russian, uh, Chinese American, uh, Chinese Nigerian. I mean, like, there's everything, right? There's everything out there. This was at an event that my friend here hosted at Tongji University, and we were just goofing around here, but he was filming some interviews in these two seats. And I even did a couple of interviews with some of the Chinese artists, because it was like an art exhibit, right? And I had to, well, he didn't speak Chinese, so I was tasked with that, right? This was in front of one of the big malls, or the big mall just down the street from the school I was at. And I don't even know how this happened, but it was known that I played the bass and guitar, and I was friends with these two guys here, this Canadian guy and this Russian dude, and I forget who was playing the drums, but I think it was a guy from Singapore. I'm not sure. And I just got up on stage and I played bass in front of a big crowd, and it was fun. Here we are. And if you remember earlier on, I said that Mr. Zhang, or Mr. Zhang, say it correctly, became one of my mentors. And this was our first meeting, I guess you would call it, our first dinner, um, after like months and months of like not seeing each other at Mr. Wu's house. And so he invited me out, and it was embarrassing because he'd given me the address, but it was kind of tough to figure out like how to get into the restaurant because it was quite far away. And so I ended up arriving a little too late, but we still, I sat down, I brought some wine, and I ended up eating a bunch and meeting all these people here. Like this guy, I believe he was in the Air Force. This lady owned her own golf course and golf academy. This guy was in like the tea business. This guy was also in the military in some capacity. And then this guy was I'm not sure if he still is, but he was the police captain of one of the districts in Shanghai. And it was just, I don't remember everything that was said because again, I was like drinking, but it was a good time. And this is just me, you know, going out to party again with my Arab friend. And then uh, this girl was from, oh God, where is she from? Not Ghana, one of these countries where they speak French, not Cameroon. Um, oh my God, I totally forgot. I forgot where she was from, but somewhere like that, somewhere like that. This was me doing a tattoo on my Chinese friend who I met in the gym. And in case you didn't know, in in the summer of 2017, I started doing tattoos because, no, no, it's a little earlier than that. It was maybe around April 2017 when I first started getting into it because a Chinese friend of mine was into it. And I reached out to him. I said, hey, can you teach me how? And I figured this would be a good business. And it is a good business. Tattooing is really quite good because it's addictive. Whether you like it or not, people who get tattoos and typically end up getting more of them. So you have repeat customers, and depending on your level of skill and how you sell yourself, you can definitely charge good prices for the work that you do. One of the main reasons why I quit doing it was because it's honestly pretty tough. I mean, you have to have a lot of strength in your hand, and you have to have a very high level of concentration. It can be tough on your back, and also because I just wasn't uh, very invested in that subculture and that community because I have no tattoos and I don't plan on getting any. So it was kind of a mismatch, right? Um, Typically, you would expect a tattoo artist to be covered in tattoos, right? But that wasn't me. I was mainly doing it for the money, and then the passion kind of fizzled out quickly. Although I did, I do feel like I had a decent amount of skill because I had many more clients besides just him. Now, this was 2018, my last year. Um, what can I say? I was so jet lagged in this picture. And now that I look at it, like I really should have invested in a better looking pair of jeans because these look kind of goofy on me. Um, but what happened is I had gone to Mexico for a couple of weeks in January. And then as soon as I came back here, Mr. Zhang invited me out to his hometown, like his home village. And Chinese hospitality and hospitality in a lot of places usually involves like, you know, pressuring a guest to drink alcohol. And so even though I really didn't want to, I caved in, I had some drinks, and I could barely even stand at this point. I was so jet lagged and I was so exhausted after um, taking the trip because what happened is I had gotten back from Mexico, which is a very long flight. And then I think I slept. And then that very same day, I got on a train to go out to Wenzhou. And then he picked me up, and then we went out to dinner and everything. And we met some of his friends from the village there, right? This was what you'd call oh, I'm not even sure I'm allowed to say that on YouTube. Not that I give a fuck, but I don't want this video to get taken down. Let's just say this was like a foreigner job. I got in touch with a lady who was kind of connected and knew a lot of jobs where they wanted foreigners to appear. And she said, yeah, to myself and my German friend here, like, you're two tall, good-looking white guys. We want you to just show up to this event here and just look nice and let the girls take pictures with you, right? Um, so yeah, I got paid a little bit of money for that. Not much, but something. This is back in the village. That was a really interesting experience. I tried my hand at pottery, and they make that look a lot easier than it actually is. Um, like, as you might be able to tell, I was totally messing it up here. Um, yeah, this is just my physique, how I was looking. Uh, Nothing too impressive. This guy, I had met at one of the dinners with Mr. Zhang, and I do remember him explicitly saying that he had never had a conversation with a foreigner in his life. So this is like the first time. And if you go to China, you'll get a lot of that if you speak Chinese, right? You will meet a lot of them, and then they'll be very happy to just pick your brain and get to know you and have a conversation with you. And again, this was in the village. There's Mr. Zhang beside me, and that is it. So, people, there's still so much more to my time out there in China, but stop the share. But yeah, it's just it was a crazy time for me, and I think one of the things that made it so special is that I really didn't have a care in the world. I didn't feel inadequate. I didn't feel like what I was doing was wrong, except maybe for a brief period of time um, when I was attending that one school. But I was making my way. I was making my way through it, right? I was teaching English and learning Chinese and just exploring. And now I'm in a very different position, but I really hope to reclaim that sense of life, sense of magic, because it's in all of us. But I feel like so many people just get beaten down by expectations, especially financial pressures, right? And it's valid, right? If you don't have money, you can't really go out and experience all of these things. But I still think what I did was the right thing to do because, as I said earlier, I took advantage of opportunities from scholarships and whatnot so that I could go and live my life in the most carefree manner possible and just be and just have experiences. And they may not pay off that much right now, but in the future, every single experience I've had will pay off. And I think that's a healthy way of looking at it. So, anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I know this was a very long video, but hopefully it's giving you a lot of insight and perspective into what living in China was like as a foreigner. And I might do this series in Chinese if you want to listen to it. I'm not sure if probably not going to do it today because I'm kind of tired. But yeah, so um, until then, guys, take it easy. Peace.